Pixar movies have made us cry with toys, robots, and even monsters. But with Soul, they did something even braver. They made a film about life itself. Not just chasing dreams, not just family, but the biggest question of all. What makes life worth living? And what makes Soul a masterpiece is how it takes this massive question and brings it down to earth. It doesn't lecture us. It doesn't give us one right answer. Instead, it shows us through jazz, pizza, laughter, and quiet little moments that life is not about some grand purpose. It's about living right now. At the start, Joe Gardner is us. He believes happiness is out there, waiting at the finish line. He tells himself, once I get that gig, once I make it as a musician, then my life will mean something. This is how many of us live, tying our worth to achievement, careers, or recognition. Psychologists call this the arrival fallacy, the belief that when we achieve X, we'll finally be happy. But Joe's story flips it upside down. Even when he finally plays the gig of his dreams, he realizes it feels incomplete because purpose isn't a destination. But why jazz? Because jazz is improvisation. It's messy, unpredictable, alive in the moment. You don't play jazz to get to the end of the song, you play because every note matters. And that's the film's hidden metaphor. Life is jazz. It's not about racing to the final, not about reaching some perfect goal. It's about savoring the rhythm of everyday moments. That's why the film's most powerful scenes aren't cosmic, they're quiet. A haircut, a meal, winds in the trees, the little notes of life. When Joe falls into the great before, Pixar does something remarkable. It turns philosophy into play. Instead of abstract lectures about the soul, we get a colorful, whimsical space where personalities are formed, guided by these strange but lovable beings called Jerry. What's brilliant here is accessibility. The film isn't tied to any religion. It gives us a space big enough for everyone, regardless of belief. It says, maybe what matters isn't some divine plan, but how we choose to live the life we're given. Then comes 22, the little soul who doesn't want to live. She's sarcastic, stubborn, and hopeless. She looks at life and says, what's the point? It's meaningless. 22 represents the voice in all of us that sometimes whispers the same thing. The part of us that feels lost, unmotivated, or crushed under expectations. And what changes her? Not a big revelation, not a grand achievement, just small, simple things. Pizza, walking, laughing, being alive. Her journey mirrors the psychology of mindfulness, the idea that joy comes from presence, not from future accomplishments. The climax isn't Joe getting his dream gig, it's Joe sitting at his piano, reflecting on all the tiny, ordinary memories of his life. Sunlight through trees, laughter with his mother, small, everyday moments he once ignored. This is the most radical thing Soul does. Most movies, especially animated ones, tell us to chase dreams, reach goals, find our one true passion. But Soul tells us something braver. Even if you never become famous, even if your life seems ordinary, it still matters. Life is not wasted if it isn't flashy. Life is meaningful simply because you are here to live it. Released in 2020, in the middle of a global pandemic, Soul hit us when we were all asking the same questions. Joe asked, what matters when the world stops? What do we do when our big plans collapse? Soul's answer was a gentle reminder. Even when tomorrow is uncertain, there is joy in right now, in eating, in talking, in just being. That's why the film resonated so deeply. It doesn't give us escapism. It gave us expectations. The emotional heart of part 2 is the montage where Joe plays piano and remembers his life. Not his achievements, not the big milestones, just moments. leaves falling, a smile, a simple meal. This sequence is why Soul transcends being just another Pixar movie. It redefines success away from external validation and towards presence. It tells us that if we never become famous, if our lives seem small on paper, it isn't extraordinary, because every ordinary moment, every spark, is what makes existence worthwhile. When Joe finishes his performance, he expects transcendence. Instead, he feels the same. The next day looks like yesterday. This is the arrival fallacy we talked about earlier, the trap of believing happiness will come when we reach the finish line. This moment is universal. How many of us have chased grades, jobs, relationships, only to find the feeling fades? Pixar puts that disillusionment on screen, and by doing so, it validates it. If even Joe's dream doesn't fill the void, maybe the problem isn't the dream. Maybe it's the way we measure meaning. The turning point is Joe at the piano. Instead of replaying his dream performance, he replays his life, leaves drifting, his mother's smile, teaching students, laughter, light. This scene is simple but profound. It shows us that a meaningful life isn't built out of milestones, but of moments. What Joe rediscovers is gratitude, the psychological practice of finding value in the ordinary. It's not flashy, but it's revolutionary. Joe's greatest act comes when he decides to give 22 her chance at life. He realizes that his spark, his real purpose, isn't just about himself. It's about passing the gift of living onto others. This flips the typical hero narrative. Most stories are about getting the prize. Joe's is about letting it go. His growth is measured not in what he takes, but in what he gives. Philosophically, this echoes humanist ethics. Life is richest when it's shared. When Joe is rewarded with another shot at life, it isn't framed as triumph. It's framed as responsibility. What matters is not that he's alive again, but how he will live. This film leaves this open. We don't see what Joe does next, and that's brilliant, because the point isn't whether he plays more gigs, teaches, or simply walks the streets. The point is that he will live life differently. He will notice, he will be present, he will find sparks in the ordinary. And that's where Soul becomes radical. It tells us you don't need to change the world to justify your life. You just need to live it. Most Pixar films end with victory. Toy Story with friendship, Up with adventure, Inside Out with emotional growth. But Soul ends with an invitation. It turns the camera back on us. What would you do if you had a second chance? Would you keep chasing a finish line? Or would you slow down and savor the sparks around you? This is why Soul lingers. It doesn't close the book, it opens it. It doesn't give you answers, it gives you questions. And that's what elevates it from a movie to a masterpiece. At the end of the day, Soul isn't just another Pixar film. It's one of the boldest works of animation ever made. Why? Because it doesn't just entertain us, it challenges us. It dares to ask questions we usually avoid. Why are we here? What makes life worth it? What if our dreams aren't enough? Most films, especially animated ones, tell us to chase our destiny, fight for our dreams, achieve the impossible. But Soul flips that script completely. It tells us that life is not waiting on the other side of achievement. Life is happening right now, in every breath, in every small spark of joy that we often take for granted. Joe Gardner spent his life believing that only a big break could give him meaning. He believed his existence was unfinished, incomplete, until he could prove himself on stage. And yet, his real awakening came not from applause, not from recognition, but from memory. From looking back on the ordinary moments of his life and realizing they weren't ordinary at all. They were the very essence of living. And that message is more than just inspiring, it's radical, because we live in a culture that constantly tells us that we are not enough, that we need to hustle harder, succeed more, buy more, achieve more. Soul cuts through all that noise and says, you are enough. Your life, as it is enough. Think about how rare that is. A children's film that grapples with death, nihilism, and purpose. But instead of giving us a neat answer, it leaves us with an open invitation to notice the taste of food, the sound of laughter, the light on the trees, the music in a single note. To realize that these things are not distractions from life, they are life. The true genius of soul is that it doesn't try to tell us what our purpose should be. It doesn't offer a checklist of what our life makes valuable. Instead, it shifts the entire question. It shows us that the meaning of life isn't something we find out there in some perfect destiny. It's something we create moment by moment. Now we choose to live. Now we choose to connect. Now we choose to notice. And maybe that's why soul has lingered with so many of us. Because deep down, we've all been Joe. We've all told ourselves, once I get there, once I achieve this, then I'll finally be happy. And we've all faced the same hollow feeling when we arrive and realize happiness doesn't live in milestones. It lives in the everyday. So if soul leaves us with anything, it's this. Don't wait for life to start. Don't postpone joy until you've achieved some grand dream. Notice it now, in the food you eat, the people you love, the music you hear, the breath you're taking in this very moment. That's the masterpiece. That's the spark. That's the gift. Joe Gardner's story isn't just his, it's ours. And Pixar reminds us, in the most beautiful way possible, that life isn't measured in achievements or applause. It's measured in living. And if we take that to heart, then maybe the next time we walk outside or share a meal or laugh with someone we love, we'll pause just for a moment and realize we're already where we're meant to be. That's what makes soul unforgettable. That's what makes it a masterpiece.